All right, back to the little space up. Let's get back to this highway. All right, between 1990 and 1992, June 1992, somewhere in the summertime, the beginning of the summer, this particular highway had been blacktopped. Now, the highway's really not in great shape right now. Uh, it's always been a rough part of the highway to keep in shape. Even when it was dust, it was just very, very hard to keep this particular part of this highway in any type of good condition. So even keeping it in this particular level of condition is it's pretty good. But overall, the highway, when it was just a dirt highway, a 2-lane dirt highway, was a highway that was heavily filled by potholes. And that's because of the land. The land in itself is just continuously washing over and over. So it will require continuous maintenance, at least 2 to 3 times a year, which you would have to probably be someone, you know what I'm saying, providing some, most highways in America are owned by people and not owned by the government or the state. So it would have been up to one of the descendants out of these properties, black or white, to buy the highway and make it for public use and keep the maintenance of the highway good. So unfortunately, since those descendants are passed and deceased and are unable to accumulate funds or even enough funds to maintain themselves in some sensible, sustainable manner because of the type of gang harassment that's going on, we want to sit here and we want to look at this. We want to be clear here that this home is a little bit more targeted than the other home from the infrastructure. As we look here, looking up and down the highway here, we can see that this particular home has not been targeted at all. So there's no imprints or suggestions someone is spinning, the ground is cracking. And we also want to state that the surface there is a little, in that there's a hole or a slump there where water should collect. And there is a perfect pipe there that stops water from collecting there. So we say that this is evidence of a large amount of traffic and a large amount of vehicles in this particular area. And we should say from this evidence in this particular area that between the years of 2006 to 2019, this year, this is where this came from. Because initially, this portion of the highway was quite good. This was one of the best parts of the highway. But upon attacking the older gentleman that lived here, who was a herdsman, you can see where they spin off and they make a lot of potholes here, and they constantly stop up and down the highway, and they meet right here. And what they do here when they meet is they schedule things. They schedule things for the gangsters, and for the gang members, and for the electronic things. They schedule electronic things. They stop here. They schedule things such as falls. They get out, and since this is the human to brain communication, they get out, and one of them might stand over here. 2 or 3 cars might stand here, and they'll fall. And one of them will fall, and one of them take a picture of them, and one of them use the communication, use the brain waves of the communication that's been used from them falling. They'll take that particular thing, and then they'll send it to, then they'll send that particular form of communication to a device or some type of receiver that's found in the house. Anything can be used as an RFID receiver. And send it to even organic things can be used as RFID receivers. They send this thing to an RFID receiver. Once it's sent to the RFID receiver, then the person who is in contact with the RFID receiver receives that information, and the person has a dramatic fall. And it looks as innocent and as natural as, Jell-O pudding, which is not natural. So then here, now this is recently the area where they've been scheduling, I think, my gunshot. Now, they've been scheduling that through providing several people up and down the highway, gang members and different people, drug affiliated people driving up and down the highway, heavily affiliated with drugs, ecstasy, all this different types of stuff, sitting here and between here next to this mailbox here. And they've been scheduling this just by simply getting out, pointing their guns at each other, pointing their guns at each other, pointing their guns at family members, pointing their guns at friends, pointing their guns at anybody they can point the guns at, sending that brain communication and sending that thing to someone, and then sending that thing to an RFID receiver. So we want to make sure that these are not crimes that cannot be discovered. These are crimes that have not been looked for, and from the particular mechanism in which they should be looked for. Once they're looked for, they're very apparent, they're very in your face, they're very wide open, they're there. So we want to make sure that we get this. We're not trying to circumvent any type of whatever they decided or whatever they planned, but we're just trying to make sure this information gets out before it continues on to almost every part of society, because things like this have a nature of coming to African Americans first, then continuing on to the European Americans, and continuing on to the Asian Americans, and continuing on to the rest of the part of society. And I particularly don't think that this is a good thing, like the ghetto. So we want to make sure that this is what's going on. So at the event of the truck accident, he planned that event. And once that event was planned, he carried out that event through psychoelectronic harassment. So brain to brain and human communication. Once that event was planned, he carried it out, and he kind of, I mean, it wasn't perfect, but the truck basically is as if the truck was stopped and lined up and hit, and then as it hit and it was just pushed down to make sure he gets the right impact, or someone had done it before over and over and over to make sure that was the same impact. So you might find, if you were to look at the evidence on the truck and the pictures of the truck through the insurance company, you might find several vehicles with that particular type of damage, and that they do have that particular type of damage that comes from that RFID receiver, that particular form of human to human and brain to brain communication. So what we have going on here is we're going to take a look at this. We're going to try to get up this highway because we have a little dog up the highway, and maybe we can